controversial golf resort a win-win for Hoylake. The developer of the controversial £200 million Hoylake Golf Resort says local people will get to have their say on the plans and insists the Greenbelt scheme will be good for the local environment. Jim Anderson, chairman of the Nicholas Joint Venture Group, NJVG, told the Echo the scheme would be a win-win for Hoylake. But campaigners are still battling plans for the course and for the 160 red row houses that go with it. They fear Hoylake could be a smokescreen for developers building on Greenbelt in Wirral. Opposition councillors say they still want to kill off the plans, and another protest is being planned for later this month after councillors called an extraordinary general meeting on February the 25th to debate the plans. The project is being developed by NJVG, named after the golfing legend Jack Nicklaus. The development will be run by the Celtic Manor Resort in South Wales. Mr Anderson said the project will be self-funding. In fact, the council will earn out of it. If you think about the council tax and rates the project is going to be paying, I calculate it's going to be somewhere around £1 million a year. From my perspective, it's a win-win situation. From the environmental point of view, up to 50% of the golf course will be a natural habitat. That's not what exists now. We really want to engage with the public. We want to understand what the concerns are. Around 4% of the project site is earmarked for housing. There will be 160 houses built by Redrow, as well as 40 apartments. Mr Anderson estimated that only 10% of the Hoylake business will be directly golf related. The rest of the money will come from leisure, conferences and business. The development will employ up to 100 people initially, he said, and the opportunities will include managers, bellboys, waitresses and spa workers. But leader of Wirral's Conservative group, Councillor Ian Lewis, said, the Cabinet is obsessed with building up to 200 luxury houses on the Greenbelt, in spite of the mounting public opposition to it. Their own reports point to a falling participation in golf, so why build another course backed by up to £26 million of public money? Councillor Lewis said he believed there was a significant opposition within the governing Labour group of councillors to the scheme, as well as from other parties and the wider public. We have called the extraordinary council meeting on February 25th to kill off this project once and for all, he said. Wirral's Lib Dem leader, Councillor Phil Gilchrist, called it a speculative development in the Green Belt and questioned whether the land should be sacrificed. Phil Simpson from the Stop the Hoylake Golf Resort Action Group also said he was not convinced by Mr Anderson's defence of the scheme. The group has called the golf course a smokescreen for the housing development, and Mr Simpson said he still wanted to see evidence of the environmental and employment gains. He added, the people of Wirral are infuriated about the Greenbelt and the golf resort. A spokesman for Wirral Council said, we're reviewing the business case. A decision will be made in the very near future.
Crackdown on ticket touts at the Grand National. People who try and sell tickets at this important event could be handed hefty fines and banned from the area under new council rules. Sefton Council has launched a public consultation on the issue of ticket touting at the famous racing event after a recent sharp rise in the practice. The local authority wants to introduce a public space protection order which would make it an offence to sell, offer for sale or advertise tickets for the 3-day event within a designated area. Failing to comply with the order would result in ticket touts being required to leave the area for up to 24 hours, as well as being slapped with a £75 fixed penalty notice. A consultation will now run until March the 10th, with residents being asked their views on the proposed public space protection order. Sefton Council Cabinet Member for Regulation and Compliance, Paulette Lappin, said Ticket touting at the Grand National is an ongoing issue, and we want to curb it. Touts can be intimidating, and their behaviour may cause distress to members of the public and racegoers during what should be a completely enjoyable experience. We know through evidence provided there's been a significant increase in the number of touts during the last 4 years. Ward councillors, Aintree Parish Council and the Jockey Club and local businesses will also be asked to give their views on the consultation.
Touts are also causing problems for football fans. A man was arrested after allegedly trying to sell a fake ticket for this week's Champions League game to a Bayern Munich fan. According to witnesses, 2 local men tried to sell a ticket for £200 in Williamson Square. A fight then broke out after the Germans were warned by local people that they were being scammed and attempted to get their money back. The police quickly arrived and 1 man was arrested, but the other is believed to have run off with the £200. Locals at the scene were caught in the crossfire, particularly an elderly man who was almost knocked to the ground. Other bystanders were embarrassed and disappointed by what had happened. Chris O'Connor, 49, from Kirby said, "Just one idiot there trying to sell fake tickets. They got the money and ran off with it, making a show of the city. We aren't all like that."
And speaking of illegal activities, this truck trader stole £1/3 million. A truck dealer who stole £1/3 million in VAT while still claiming unemployment benefits was jailed. John Peter Doyle, who's 47, spent lavishly on trips to expensive hotels and restaurants, as well as splashing out on shopping sprees. Doyle of Blenheim Street in Vauxhall collected hundreds of pounds in unemployment benefits, while his business account had more than 3.2 million paid into it over a 14-month period. Despite the huge sums being paid into his business account between February 16 and May 17, Doyle paid no VAT on the trucks and plant machinery he traded. A HMS Customs and Revenue probe revealed Doyle traded millions of pounds of vehicle and pocketed the VAT charged on every sale. He was sentenced to 3 years and 2 months in jail at a hearing in Liverpool Crown Court on Wednesday and disqualified from being a company director for over 10 years. Albion Trucks and Plant was registered to a residential address in Blenheim Street, Vauxhall, with Doyle conducting sales through a website. His activities were uncovered when a customer was unable to register their imported vehicle with the DVLA because no duty had been paid. Assistant Director, Fraud Investigation Service, HMRC, Tim Atkins said, Doyle lived the high life with the stolen cash, but the wheels have now come off and he's behind
Vauxhall,
bars.
no news on jobs until Brexit. Workers must wait to see if more redundancies are on the way. Fearful workers at the Vauxhall car plant in Ellesmere Port will have to wait until after Brexit to see if their jobs are safe. Honda this week confirmed it will close its Swindon plant with a loss of 3,500 jobs, and industry experts have long said that Ellesmere Port is vulnerable until it wins a model to replace the Astra it currently builds, which is nearing the end of its life. The plant has lost hundreds of workers in recent months. After 241 job cuts were announced in November, workers walked out in fury. The car industry globally is battling to cope with a changing market, including the move away from diesel and the need to move towards electric cars. But many car makers, including Vauxhall and Jaguar Land Rover, are worried about what a no-deal Brexit could mean for them. They depend on being able to ship parts and finished cars across borders and fear that extra customs checks or tariffs will disrupt production. Union leaders have called on Vauxhall parent PSA, which also owns Peugeot and Citroën, to announce a new model for the plant. They are particularly keen for it to get a four-wheel drive similar to the Evoque, which has been a huge success for JLR at Hale Wood. But a spokesperson for the Vauxhall said no decision about the future of Ellesmere Port will be taken until the outcome of the Brexit negotiations is known. Officials from trade union Unite and the plant's MP are now demanding that the government get a deal with the EU to ensure car companies like Vauxhall can trade freely with the EU after Brexit. Unite Regional Officer Mick Chalmers said, "The statement from Vauxhall underlines why the government must ensure when we leave the European Union that frictionless trade is guaranteed in the long term. A failure by the government to do so would be a betrayal to the workers at Ellesmere Port and the entire automotive industry." Unite intends to fully engage with the PSA management in their feasibility studies to examine how the plant can become more competitive. The UK is a major market for PSA's vehicles, and workers and customers expect that loyalty to be repaid. Ellesmere Port and Neston MP Justin Madders said the UK should stay in a customs union with the EU to protect the country's car industry. He said, "We've been through this closure rumours many times before. I know the management and unions and workforce will do whatever is necessary to put themselves in the best position. My role is to help them achieve that, to get as much government support as possible, and to make sure that when the plant bids for the model, it's in a good place. All of that is contingent on getting a deal when we leave the EU that keeps frictionless trade. For me, that means we have to be part of a customs union." Analysts told the Echo that global sales for mid-range vehicles like the Astra were falling, putting Ellesmere Port in a vulnerable position. By contrast, Halewood, where around 60,000 people work, has seen an investment in recent years following the huge global success of the Evoque. JLR confirmed last year that the new Evoque would be built at Halewood, securing its medium-term future for that plant.
Entries are needed for the National Youth Gala. Again, excuse me, please. Entries are needed for the British Blind Sport National Youth Swimming Gala, which will take place at the University of Birmingham Sport and Fitness Centre on Saturday, March the 30th. The gala is free to enter for all blind and partially sighted children aged between 8 and 17. Free, one-to-one and small group lessons are also on offer for children aged 5 to 17 who want to learn how to swim. Elena McGregor of British Blind Sport said, "Every year we see how the gala makes a real difference to young people living with sight loss, many of whom have never had the opportunity to participate in a sporting event that is adapted to suit their needs. So now they can compete alongside their peers."
Camel Laird has just launched a newly built ferry, and bosses at the Birkenhead yard say they hope its success will help them win a deal to build the new Mersey ferries. The £10 million red Kestrel was floated in the Mersey for the first time in a low-key ceremony watched by bosses from the Birkenhead yard and owner Red Funnel. Camel Laird last year launched the polar research ship, the Sir David Attenborough, formerly known as Boaty McBoatface, in a ceremony that attracted national attention. The yard now faces a critical year ahead, as once it completes the Sir David Attenborough and the Red Kestrel, there could be a gap in work. A strike last year over planned redundancies was called off, and talks between bosses and unions are still ongoing. But Camel Laird is bidding for more work to help secure jobs at the site, including contracts for more military work and for the new Mersey ferries. The 74-metre-long Red Kestrel will operate freight services between Southampton and the Isle of Wight. It's now afloat in the yard's wet basin, where it will be completed. Camel Laird's Chief Operating Officer Tony Graham said its launch was a significant moment for the yard and for Mersey shipbuilding. He said in 2017 the government announced a national shipbuilding strategy. They talked about a renaissance in UK shipbuilding. Well, Camel Laird is bringing that to life. So last year we launched the Sir David Attenborough. This year we're launching Red Kestrel. 2019 is a very important year because the government's tendering for 5 frigates for the Royal Navy, as well as 3 ammunition ships. But equally, and just as importantly for Camel Led, we're bidding for the 2 Mersey ferries. So we're hoping that this ferry gets some attention inside the city. Last year, Unite and the GMB launched strike action over the yard's plan to axe almost 300 jobs at the yard. The action was suspended in December for more talks, and after Mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, announced a task force to help the yard win new work. Mr Graham said, "We continue to work constructively with the trade unions. Obviously it's self-evident that the 2 big ships are coming to an end. We're near the final stages for Red Kestrel. We're working with them. Some form of redundancies are inevitable. We're just talking with the unions about timing. But the important thing is that there is a big, bright and important economic shipbuilding revolution going on here at Camel Laird, and we would like to work constructively with the unions to secure that future." Mr Graham said he was optimistic about the yard's future, adding, "We need the confidence of our customers, so we need the unions working with us to try and convince everyone that Camel Laird is the right place to build ships." The Red Kestrel is Red Far's first freight ferry. Operations Director Mark Slawson said he was impressed with Camel Laird's work. He said, "We went around the world to find someone to design and build this, and Camel Laird won the international competition. We signed the contract for the design and build on February the 10th last year, and there she is in the water, which is a heck of an achievement in the timeline. The design capability at Camel Laird is impressive, the build capability is impressive, and the whole attitude is impressive. We've had fun while we've been doing this."
James Brewster and Luke Traynor are Echo reporters, and they write this story about a dad who loses a fight to prosecute the driver for his wife's death. A grieving husband whose wife was killed by an out-of-control car has lost a legal battle to prosecute the driver because the motorist was temporarily insane at the time. Mother of 2, Lauren Johnson, who was 33, died at College Road, Crosby, Merseyside, when a Toyota Aris mounted the pavement and hit her in 2016. But the driver, George Steele, was not taken to court by CPS because lawyers claimed he was in a daze and unresponsive beforehand and might have been suffering from insane automatism. Her devastated partner, David, now 38, who was left to look after their 2 children, now aged between 4 and 2, tried to fight the decision not to prosecute Steele, who has now been named for the first time. The motorist was travelling at over 50 miles an hour in a 20 mile an hour zone before his car hit a van and veered onto the pavement. Mrs. Justice Yip said, "On the face of it, then, there was a clear piece of dangerous driving which caused the death of Mrs. Johnson." But the medical expert said an MRI scan after the crash revealed that Steele had a hardening of the arteries and interfects of the brain. This supported the CPS opinion that if he was prosecuted, the most likely outcome was that Mr. Steele would be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Mr. Johnson challenged the decision, claiming that CPS failed to follow its own policy and misunderstood the medical evidence. The judge said that prosecutors considered all the available evidence, including dashcam footage, eyewitness accounts, and a forensic collision report. They concluded there was a strong support in the evidence for Mr. Steele having no control over his driving. Mr. Johnson fundamentally disagreed with that conclusion, and the judge accepted that it was for Mr. Steele to prove that he was suffering from this insane automatism. But dismissing the widower's challenge, she ruled that the CPS's approach to the evidence was perfectly rational. She added, "The accident was an unimaginable tragedy for the Lauren Johnson's family. It touched the wider community, and concerns have spread well beyond the immediate family." But dismissing Mr. Johnson's judicial review challenge, the judge concluded, looking at it in a broad common sense way, the decision was rational and lawful. The CPS did not ignore the seriousness of the offence or the impact on the family and community.
You bid for little in Wirral. Lidl is still desperate to open a store in Wirral and has submitted a fresh planning application just months after having a similar one rejected. The discount store wants to open a new supermarket in Bromborough and has adapted a previously refused planning application for its site next to Croft Retail Park on the corner of Colbeck Road and Thursby Road. The initial application, which was supported by a petition of almost 300 people, was submitted nearly 3 years ago. But in May last year it was finally rejected by Wirral Council planners. Among the reasons for rejection were that Lidl would be unsuitable at that location in the Wirral International Business Park, an area designated for industry rather than shops. But the firm has come back with a fresh application submitted on the 1st of February for the site, which is currently occupied by 2 derelict commercial buildings and fronts onto the A41 Newchester Road. There are several changes to the new application, such as a reduced number of car parking spaces. If approved, it will have 127 parking spaces and open 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Saturdays and for a 6-hour period between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Sundays, and it will provide up to 40 jobs.
That concludes this week's reading of a selection of local news from the Liverpool Echo. We thank them for permission to record their material, the Royal Mail for deliveries and fellow volunteers working on the LTN. When you have finished listening to the USB stick, place it in the address card in the yellow postal wallet and return it to us. There's no postage to pay. Talking newspapers are covered by the articles for the blind free post concession. If you wish to contact us by phone, the office staff are only in the office on Thursday and Friday mornings from 9:30 until 11 a.m. Otherwise, please leave a message on the answer phone. Our telephone number is 0151 486 1400. As most of you seem to prefer putting messages in the wallets, you may continue to do so. Our editors of the magazine, news and Christian news teams would welcome feedback from listeners. It will be helpful to know if we're providing the items which you enjoy. And on behalf of everyone at the LTN, goodbye.